Hi everyone, I'm Hannah and this is the Purple Sector, and today we're going to be talking about all the virtual racing that's been going on during the lockdown period and some of the things that it's highlighted and some of the actions needed going forward to try and bring it more into the F1 sphere. So firstly, I'm going to touch on the four major instances and the kind of scandals that have happened with virtual racing in the past couple of weeks of lockdown. So one of the major ones is the Daniel App scandal. So he was fired from Audi Formula E team after using a professional sim driver to race on his behalf at the Race at Home Challenge. Questions were flagged by other drivers at the time as to whether he was racing or not, and when it was found doubt that it wasn't him racing, the team sacked him. They said it was not sportsmanlike conduct and sacked him. The purpose of these races was to not only entertain the fans but was also to raise money for UNICEF. Well, teams and sponsors got heavily involved in this, which gave it kind of a prominence that some of the other racing formats didn't have. So you also had the incident with Kyle Larson. He was fired from Chip Ganassi Racing in NASCAR after using a racial slur during one of their virtual races, and the team rightfully, whether he thought it was being recorded or not, rightfully sacked him after the incident came to light. You also had the situation with Bubba Wallace back in early April, where he decided to rage quit from the Food City Showdown at the virtual Bristol Motor Speedway. He had been crashed into by another driver, decided to basically rage quit, he'd had enough, and as a response, one of his sponsors, Blue Emu, decided to drop him. Finally, you also had the incident at the virtual IndyCar Indianapolis race. So there were kind of 2 points to this. The first was Simon Pagenaud's decision to deliberately take Lando Norris out of the race. So you had Simon Pagenaud was unhappy that Lando Norris, a Formula 1 driver, was leading the virtual IndyCar race, and he basically jokes in his stream about taking him out. Lando was in the lead, and he deliberately slows down, causing Lando to crash into him. You also had a situation later on in the race when Santino Ferrucci, the former Haas test driver, decided to barge into Lando's teammate Oliver Askew and was actually laughing on camera about the incident. I think these four instances highlight some of the major issues that have come forward from virtual racing. I think it's very much in this format a product of its time, with having the professional racing drivers involved. Was done as a way to entertain the fans because of coronavirus. They couldn't actually go racing, although now, at the time I'm filming this, IndyCar has just had its first race back and Formula 1 will be coming back in a few weeks. But I do think these virtual races are going to have ramifications. Naturally, as you've seen, 2 drivers have already been sacked from their races as a consequence of this, and I think it also highlights kind of the 4 main points that I've picked out. Firstly, is kind of the future of esports as a whole. These races, in a lot of them, have been seen as a bit of a fun, bit of a laugh. There have been arguments whether they have damage on or damage off, how seriously the drivers take it. However, the one thing it has highlighted is, in some ways, some drivers' disrespect towards virtual racing. If you look at Formula 1, for example, they actually run their own esports championship, which the teams get heavily involved in, have their own kind of squads or esports stables, and they take pride in it. And then you see if you look at Lando Norris, for example, Lando Norris has a high respect for virtual sim drivers, and has shown it through willingness to take part in stream and other things, and the respect that he always accords to it, as well as, for example, on the latest F1 Virtual Grand Prix, when they're a couple of the drivers, so I think it's Charles Leclerc and Lando Norris, are talking about George Russell and saying actually that he's getting up to the quality of these virtual sim drivers. I think there's that level of respect, whereas in some series they don't necessarily accord the same respect for it. For example, looking at that IndyCar race, the fact that Simon Pagenaud thought, I'm going to take Lando Norris out, A, because I'm not happy, but also, oh, it's a bit of fun, it's a bit of a laugh. Actually, no, for some people they do take this very seriously. The thing that all racing drivers, regardless of say, should have is that respect for drivers of different platforms, whether that be in person or in virtual. The fact that the Formula 1 drivers have said that how well the sim drivers race is a league beyond their capabilities, is it's a respect of the differing skills each career path has. And I think also it highlights what we're seeing very much with the start of Formula E compared to Formula 1. Formula 1 didn't, I think, take Formula E that seriously at the beginning. It was kind of a series that came in and people thought, well, they have to change cars, they have to do this and that. The fact they have fan boost, oh, we won't take it seriously. And I would say now probably Formula E is a bigger threat to Formula One's future, because Formula E adapts to its fans. It's also very progressive in its outlook. There's a lot of things it could still be doing, but it's also maintaining environmental change and trying to change attitudes in multiple ways. I think Formula One risks falling behind on that. And then now you have it with the W Series, the fact that initially in the beginning a lot of people aren't taking it seriously, and it'll be interesting to see when, hopefully soon, the first female driver in decades finally is on the grid, because especially if they've come from the W Series, it'll highlight the good that series will do for women racers. I think at the moment everyone thinks, oh, it'll happen someday. It's an eventuality. I hope it is an eventuality, but that's not the point. The point is that you actively have to do something to enable women to be able to race. It's kind of a two-pronged system of you've got to tackle the stereotypes, the fact they say, oh, Formula One's a man's sport because it relies on certain muscles, or like women can't develop muscles in those areas, or requires a certain level of stamina, or women haven't got the emotional capabilities to cope with it. Women have got the emotional capabilities to cope with a lot of things just as well as a man can. And I think it's those kind of stereotypes they all have to deal with, but also the grassroots system of the fact that not a lot of girls get into motorsports. I'm a big motorsport fan. I've loved it my whole life. But I never thought of becoming a driver, because for me, it was not only a man's sport, but also a very expensive sport. It was something that's not easily accessible. And I think that highlights with Formula One and with a lot of motorsports these days, the fact that it is incredibly privileged. That you can have Lewis Hamilton would not get where he is today if he was trying to do it today, if that makes sense. So his rise growing up would not be possible in 2020. It just wouldn't, because he wouldn't have been able to afford it, even if his dad was working 3 jobs and things like that. It is now a lot more expensive than it was. And that's why the prominence of paid drivers and the criticism exists, because paid drivers have existed on the grid since the start. That's how Formula One basically became Formula One, is through paid drivers being able to afford to race. But these days and age, it's become an increasingly exclusive sport, and I think virtual racing has allowed Formula One and other motorsports to broaden their horizons to new people. One of the other things I think it highlights is the hyper awareness that is going to be on the younger drivers, especially in Formula One, going forward. We have all loved the Twitch streams, I myself having an avid watcher of them, but it's very much going to focus the attention on the likes of George Russell, Nicholas Latifi, Charles Leclerc, Lando Norris, Alex Albon and somewhat Max Verstappen. It's going to very much highlight the attention on them. Like, we know, for example, that George Russell and Alex Albon have a strong friendship, and it's been shown throughout interviews. Same with Max Verstappen and Lando Norris. But I think now there's going to be a hyper-awareness attention of them as people and not so much them as drivers. I think that's both a good thing and a bad thing, in that I like seeing more of the personality of drivers. For example, I've watched Charles Leclerc race since he was in Formula 2, and you never really saw as much of his personality come out until now. There was kind of a lot of the pressure from Ferrari, that Ferrari have very much a standard model. If you compare Sebastian Vettel from how he was at Red Bull to how he is at Ferrari, he's a lot less jokey around, maybe more so in recent years, but there is still kind of that reservedness that you tend to see in Ferrari drivers that you don't tend to see in, for example, Red Bull. And I think it's been nice to see the personality. I hope they're able to show it in a way that's truly them, but also keeps true to them as sports people. But also I think it is going to highlight that attention on them, and you're going to have probably a lot of media gunning for them. The media is always looking for the latest story, whether it's scandal here or they've done this and that, and there's going to be a hyper awareness on them as who they are. And from London, they're 20 somethings. They're at the first couple of years of their career, they don't necessarily need that kind of imminent focus on them as human beings. And that's one thing that I both loved but also worry going forward, is people have seen their personalities now. They are going to expect them to behave like that all the time. And when you're laughing about with your mates, streaming, crashing into each other on lawnmowers, or doing reverse races. You can have fun, you can have a laugh, there's no level of competitiveness in it. But even if you look at, say, the virtual races, is the fact that a lot of them don't actually speak, in the early races, would speak to each other. Now, for example, if you look at George Russell, he turns them off virtually, doesn't speak to any of the racers and focuses on the race. Is in the end, they're going to be at those actual Grand Prix and there to do a job. They're not going to be able to mess about in the same way they did, and I think it's both a shame, but also it's something that fans will need to realise, but also that the media will focus on. And finally, I think it's highlighted the morality needed of drivers. I think there are certain expectations you have of drivers and certain different personalities you have. For example, I always use the contrast between, say, Kimi Räikkönen and Daniel Ricciardo. Kimi Räikkönen is there because he wants to race. He, as he says in the Drive to Survive interview, it's a hobby for him. He doesn't have to do it. If he wants to speak to the media, he will. The fact that he uses his catchphrase "brah" and just sits there, like, he's not fussed. He's there to race, and that's what he wants. He doesn't care about the extra attention or anything like that. But he's also uniquely himself. But he's probably more introverted than, say, Daniel Ricciardo, who's known for being kind of the boisterous, full of life, animated character. And I think we accept that as fans, you're going to get very different personalities of drivers across not only one series, but many different series. But I think this has highlighted a certain morality that needs to be within all the drivers. So, for example, basic tenets of, even if it's something, let's say, lighthearted and fun, is a level of honesty, and also the fact that the Dang App situation is not cheating. Even if it's something you're not taking seriously, there are certain morals expected of you within your conduct. You also have the situation of, say, with Kyle Larson, is the fact that racism and any form of discrimination should not be tolerated in motorsport. I think it's been highlighted expertly by Lewis Hamilton and the Black Lives Matter movement, is that Formula 1 drivers and all motorsport drivers have a platform. They have a duty, not only as racing drivers, but as human beings, to use their profile for the better good. And I think Lewis has highlighted that, and the fact that a lot of drivers have now come out and spoke more about it, the fact that F1's come out and spoke more about it. I think there's a lot more they could do, and I think they're nowhere near where they should be. The fact that Lewis Hamilton is the only black driver on the grid after 70 years of motorsport, he is the only one on the grid, proves that motorsport is still an incredibly privileged sport, that predominantly it's white, middle class or upper class men. And I think it proves to Formula 1 that they need to do a lot more and not just say big statements, but actually put their money where their mouth is and help grassroots movements and grassroots drivers build up, but also empower their fans to tackle injustice where they see it. And it now has a job to take the lessons learned from virtual racing and from lockdown and use them going forward for not only the betterment of the sport, but the betterment of humanity as a whole. So yeah, that's me. Thank you very much for watching. Before I go, I touched upon in the video is the Black Lives Matter movement. So if you haven't seen, after the tragic death of George Floyd, protests have been erupting around the world, and I think it's incredibly important that we all realise not only what we need to do as individuals, but also what we need to do as a community. If you haven't already, I strongly urge you to go online. I'm going to leave links in the description below to petitions you can sign, letters you can send to your members of parliament or Congress representatives or whoever makes decisions in your area, but also places you can donate. And also, which I would say is actually the biggest thing you could do to help change things long term, is to educate yourselves. Everyone thinks, I've grown up in a fairly tolerant community, I would say, but there is so much about Black people's experiences that I don't know, and that from my privileged position I will never understand. And that's why I have a duty not only to educate myself, but to educate others. I think the one thing you can do more than anything else is, if you see injustice in your community, whether it's direct out racism or even microaggressions and things, or internal prejudices that people don't realise, is to call it out when you see it. And that's one of the ways that we can actually make lasting change, because everyone says, oh, we'll leave it to the next generation. Leaving it to the next generation is not good enough. You've had systematic discrimination for centuries, and you say it'll get better with the next generation. No, it won't. If you actually want to tackle systematic discrimination and racism, you actively have to tackle them now. It's not good enough waiting for the next generation, because there's still going to be people ingraining children with those prejudices. So I strongly urge you to go out there to educate yourselves. I'll leave links in the description below, and just go out there and make change, because we'll all be better people for it. So that's for me. This is Hannah from the Purple Sector. Please like, subscribe and comment below, and I'll see you soon. Hopefully I'll be able to get videos out every Saturday. I've not been feeling too well the past couple of days, which is why this video is later going out. But if you have any ideas of what you'd like to see, just comment them below, or just let me know on Twitter or on Instagram. Bye!